Hi, John. How are you this week?
Hey, Elliot, how's it going?
It's going okay. Kind of a rainy day here in the Midwest. Some weeks you and I sort of go, well, what do you want to talk about? We've got lots of choices. Some weeks we don't have any choice. This week there's only one choice, and that's the
Right.
Pandora Papers.
They're staying with the P theme, obviously,
Clearly.
From the other Paradise and Panama.
Yep.
Yeah, and obviously there's a lot of really smart people that are looking at this. The International Consortium of Investigative Journalists are doing stories every day. That's all the major papers are. So a lot of this stuff will continue to play out. But I thought it would make sense just to give our quick reaction, and obviously we will plan to do more, or certainly pass on what we see as valuable to our clients. But sort of a big picture thought I had here is nothing so much to do with the content of what's in the Pandora Papers, but what's going on in terms of whistleblowing and leaking of documents. Obviously, the Pentagon Papers had to be Xeroxed,
Right.
Thousands of pages over months before that could be, quote, leaked or distributed. That's not the case anymore. So there's more and more opportunities for good, bad, and neutral reasons to disseminate information like this.
That's true. That is absolutely true. I thought one of the interesting things, there is so much in here that it's hard to really wrap your head around all the detail. But it's pretty clear that while sanctions have been effective in many circumstances, that there's some clear evidence here that there's been some significant sanctions avoidance that we're now seeing pop up. I thought that was very interesting. I was disappointed but not surprised to see how many heads of state around the world were mentioned in this, current and former, particularly where their actions and their rhetoric are totally misaligned. That was not surprising, but it'll be interesting to see what happens to them politically through time as a result of this disclosure.
Sure, you had King Abdullah of Jordan. You had the President Zelensky of Ukraine. So that obviously is both embarrassing, and you're right, it's hard to know what's going to come from this. I think the other part too, in terms of our world, what it's going to mean in terms of potential legislation or studies. One of the themes in the stories was the use of 2 offshore trusts by an art dealer for the looting of Cambodian artifacts. So, one of the questions, we're going through the process of looking at the antiquities world to be under BSA. I think this makes it very clear that art will also be under BSA at some point.
I think that's right. And I wonder whether there'll be enough reaction politically in the U.S. to amend the Anti-Money Laundering Act section on the ultimate beneficial owner registry to make it public. It's public in the UK.
Belgium too, I believe. I think that's right.
Right. So, there is precedent, and a private one in the light of all of this disclosure makes you scratch your head about how effective will it really be if it doesn't have the power of sunlight on it.
That's right. And I've seen something just reported today that there'll be legislation, if it's not already introduced, that's been described as something called the Enablers Act, which would amend BSA to include gatekeepers. So interesting, because that's always been something that's been sort of lingering, lawyers, real estate, accounting firms, you're making that case. And, I think that's one thing that will happen. I also think, besides what you mentioned about the registry, I think it's pretty clear that once everything sort of shakes out with the beneficial owner laws and registry, very little chance that they would tailor back the CDD rule that banks have been implementing since May of 2018. I just don't see that. Congress has a short memory, so who knows? Maybe in a couple of months they no longer care. But I think it'd be pretty hard for that to happen now. So I think legislation, one of the other things that's really interesting to me, who would have guessed that South Dakota was a player in this, right? We knew about Delaware, Nevada, Alaska as places where, there's, onshore activity, onshore trusts. It's no longer, offshore is no longer the pejorative term, because you could argue South Dakota is the same as the Cayman Islands, for gosh sakes. And I think what's interesting is nobody knew about this outside of the legislatures that pushed this, because nobody focuses on this until something like this happens. So I think there'll be, further oversight on what are we doing here? Where's the transparency? And I think that's going to be the major question.
Yeah, and it'll be very interesting to see, from a federal legislative perspective, because so many of the way we do corporate law in the U.S. really at the state level, and also, essentially, trust companies are just corporations with a special purpose. It'll be interesting to see, other than using the gatekeeper approach, which you talked about. It's not perfectly clear that we could have sweeping federal legislation that would make what's happening in South Dakota illegal per se. Not saying it couldn't happen, but it's not just Congress will pass a law and that'll go away. It's like that would be challenging, I think. So
but that's why you have the gatekeepers,
correct,
potentially do that. So no, you're 100% right.
Yeah.
Obviously sunshine is the best disinfectant, as they've been saying forever.
Right.
I think the other thing here that I heard, which is really interesting, is how come there's not that much U.S. reference in these papers? And one of the reporters said, well, because here the taxes are so less on the very, very wealthy that they don't really need to do offshore banking as much as the foreign kleptocrats do. Whether that's true or not, it's kind of an interesting take on that. But I think the sanctions issue, do they work, becomes a question. And does there need to be more legislation at the federal or the state level? And what do folks in South Dakota and other places think about their state, being a haven for this type of activity? Not illegal to have offshore banking, obviously, but some of the activity is clearly enabling, money laundering and the use of illicit funds for other actions. So I think these sorts of disclosures are always valuable. Now we need an intelligent response to it, but I think we just got to stay focused on this and, continue to, see what legislation makes sense, what doesn't, and just how best to help our clients in the community navigate all this.
And keep reading. I've probably spent 5 or 6 hours reading from, the various sources, the Washington Post and the Guardian, and, a number of other very sophisticated journalistic enterprises, along with the coalition, have done or the consortium rather, have done a lot of work, and just wading through it is a time-consuming thing, but worthwhile. So I encourage people to find one or more sources and do some reading.
I agree. We'll stay on top of this, and as news breaks, if it's worth reporting on a particular week, we'll give you our 2 cents.
Yep. So I'll do the shameless plug again this week. If you're interested in this and our other podcasts, please find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you find your podcasts. And John, I'll let you do the shameless plug for the webinar this month.
So the webinar this month in October, late October, is with 2 individuals that have done so much in our space. Jack Sonnenschein, who's a career auditor, and Rick Small from Truist. And we're going to talk about navigating and working with your internal auditor. We'll probably talk a little bit about exam do's and don'ts as well. And it's an area that we constantly get asked about. So we are definitely excited about this program.
Yep. You can go to our website and sign up so that you get the link. And we think it's going to be an interesting program. So join us for that too. John, I will talk to you next week.
Take care, Elliot. Stay safe.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.